Welcome to SVG-TV's news for Wednesday, August 9th, 2023. I'm Triska Campbell with the details. SVG's first MRI machine, which was commissioned on June 29th on the 5th anniversary of the Modern Medical and Diagnostic Complex in Georgetown, will soon become fully operationalized to offer services to the general public. This is according to Acting Prime Minister Montgomery Daniel, who on radio today said a trial run has already been conducted with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment, Cuthbert Knights, being one of the persons who participated in the trial run. Minister Daniel also noted that the management of the Modern Medical Complex, where the MRI machine and unit is located, submitted to Cabinet last week rates for approval for the use of the services of the MRI to be provided. Daniel noted that figures were looked at from across the region where MRI services have already been offered. However, based on the numbers submitted, Cabinet has given approval for 30% reduction for nationals and 20% reduction for non-nationals.
The mere fact that that is so is because that Cabinet recognized that the initial cost of the equipment really was not really borne by the government. We got the facility, the equipment as a grant. And though in the overall cost submitted to Cabinet, where there is an inbuilt cost for the use over time, all of that was taken into consideration to give you the final number to which was submitted to Cabinet by the management of the Modern Medical Facility. And so there are a number of different tests which will be available to the public. A number of tests that would have been established. And so all of these different tests would have its different costs. And so when you get there, of course, you would see all of the rates, or you can call and to find out of the different rates, and whatever are the rates that would have been established. And that the locals, that is the people here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, would pay 30% less of that cost. And for non-nationals, they would pay 20% less for that cost of whatever the test to be done. So I think very soon that the facility will be offering its service to the general public now that the rates have been established. And the management and staff there, they are ready to offer this outstanding service to the public.
The MRI machine was donated by the Barbados charity Maria Holder Memorial Trust. Meanwhile, the acting Prime Minister has commended the work of the Ministry of Agriculture with its ongoing eradication exercise of the African giant snails, which have been found in several areas on the leeward side of mainland St. Vincent. Up to last Sunday, it was reported that over 15,000 of these snails were discovered in the Camden Park, Otley Hall, and Kittles areas. On radio today, Minister Daniel says the ministry has been doing a good job in reducing the population with their hunting and baiting methods.
You see, in our development and in the nation's development, and as the world becomes a village, that you are now exposed to the introduction of new pests and diseases across your borders. You know, when the banana industry was booming, here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we pride ourselves of keeping out Moko, which was close by as near as Grenada, for some 28 years. We were able to keep out black Secotoka, where if this is a similarly spot disease like the yellow Secotoka disease, but it's much more dominant in its action in killing off the green leafy areas on the plant. And so you are able to keep these things out. But there are a number of other pests and diseases that are strangers to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But they will knock on our doorstep at some point in time. And so it is our border control that has to be efficient and effective on its watch. And at our port, where vessels will dock, that you can also have transmission of such pests and diseases. And so in this case, the giant African snail is one that is on our doorstep now, and the ministry is indeed doing great work in this fight against any increase in population of this pest.
Minister Daniel further noted that the Ministry of Agriculture has submitted to the Cabinet for approval of a payout of just under $450,000 for arrowroot farmers this year.
I know some farmers have indicated that they themselves would have been continuing to take care of their fields, while others may not have been doing so quite recently. But the mere fact is that the new arrowroot factory is not yet ready to accept rhizomes. And because of that, of course, you cannot segregate against any such farmer in such payment as compensation. And so the Cabinet has approved such sums of money to be paid to our road farmers. The Ministry of Agriculture is now working out on the final details on this. And so the date is not yet identified as for the payment, but I'm sure this will be done soonest. But I would also like to indicate that the work on the factory at Orangeville is ongoing, and I'm hoping that for next year crop, that the factory will be ready for processing.
It was also noted on radio today by Minister Daniel that the Ministry of Agriculture recently welcomed another shipment of fertilizer from Morocco.
And I'm sure a number of the root crop farmers, the Sheehan, the Edo, the arrowroot farmers, I'm sure all of them will be happy in receiving 1 or 2 sacks of this Moroccan fertilizer. But while I'm on that, of course, I must indicate that I was in touch with Minister Caesar last night because of a matter that was brought to my attention of some late payment to some watchmen. And he has promised to look into that matter today so that the persons who are overseeing and guarding the fertilizer can be much happy as they do their work. We welcome the fertilizer, of course, from the different countries we have our relations with. And of course, easing the farmers on their financial burden, where the cost of fertilizer and other inputs are skyrocketing, increasing. And so the government continues to be grateful and thankful to all of the countries to which we have relations with, where part of our foreign policy is to work together and enhance our way of life.
Day one of the regional reparatory meeting taking place here in SVG for the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States to be in Antigua and Barbuda in 2024, focused on the strategic responses to external shocks impacting SIDS. The regional preparatory meeting for the 16 small island developing states of the Caribbean began on Tuesday, August 8, 2023, under the theme Charting the Course Towards Prosperity, outlining some of the challenges which continue to impact small island developing states. Members of the panel on day one spoke on the external shocks of SIDS over the last decades, noting that a lot of countries have not recovered from these shocks.
And as such, our economic fortunes are intricately tied to the strength of the international economy. External shocks on our small open economies can lead to booms and busts in employment output, balance of payment crisis, exchange rate instability, and reallocation of resources. The external shocks of the last decade have been severe in Caribbean SIDS. Those shocks are now multiple in nature and occurs at a time when we have not fully recovered from shocks from previous years. In fact, recovery from the streams of hurricanes from the early 2000s is still lingering on many of our islands. The 2008 world financial crisis and the then energy crisis saw the accumulation of foreign debt and ushered in a slew of global monetary measures that were not tailored to our specific needs. The present state of Caribbean SIDS should be a cause for concern to all. Within the last few years, external shocks are not only now multiple in nature, but are more severe, intense, and complex than ever. The impact of climate change on Caribbean SIDS is stark. The effects of the COVID-19 pandemic presented a near collapse of many of our economies, and the current war in Ukraine has driven food and energy prices towards unsustainable grounds.
Director of Climate Analytic Caribbean, Rana Haynes, and Program Officer of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, Regional Office for the Americas and Caribbean, Jera Torres, provided some recommendations to incorporate a multi-hazard and multi-dimension approach for small island developing states which continue to be impacted by climate change.
So there is no internationally agreed set of metrics for measuring loss and damage. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has not been asked to do this work. The IPCC has barely been able to speak to loss and damage the way it is spoken about in the policy discussion. In the IPCC, they speak to losses and damages, which is a bit different. So as this process for the 4th SIDS conference is set to conclude next year, after hopefully some decision is made on the operationalization of this fund, I think it would be very useful if, in speaking to the core needs of SIDS, the issue of the need for the development of loss and damage metrics is raised in this context, because it is going to have a major impact going forward on the prospects for any small island developing state to be able to access loss and damage finance.
But we are talking a lot about climate change, and we know that climate change is a big issue here for our small island development states, for the Caribbean, for the whole world. Nevertheless, climate change is only one of the big aspects on which we are confronting nowadays in terms of hazards. Due to the way how seeds has been formed in terms of geological, geomorphological, the evolution of the planets, we are also exposed to other kind of hazards like the geohazards. One of the biggest events that has killed the most people in the Caribbean region has been the earthquake of Haiti in 2010. 250,000 people have died. That has been more deaths than all of the hurricanes compared in the 21st century that we are living here. Another example, COVID-19 is a biological hazard. COVID-19 has produced most of the economic impacts in the Caribbean region in the last 23 years.
Meanwhile, Secretary General of the 4th International Conference on SIDS reassures members of the 16 small island developing states of the Caribbean that the UN system stands ready to support them in every way.
The Caribbean region drove the process towards a practical, solution-oriented approach in 1994, and I know that this regional meeting and the SIDS Fold itself will continue in this spirit. As a Secretary General of the conference, I can promise that the UN system stands ready to support you. I will work closely with the Under-Secretary General and the High Representative for LDC, LLDC, and SIDS in her capacity as Special Advisor for the conference, as well as with the entire UN system to ensure the SIDS Fold coordinates a meaningful action-oriented outcome, laying the groundwork for the sustainable future.
The UN representative noted that the preparatory meeting in SVG is the second for the year as they continue to set out the agenda for the upcoming conference in Antigua.
Last month in Mauritius, where the members of the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, and the South China Sea region gathered to discuss the regional obstacles to sustainable development, including a lack of the reliable finance, underdeveloped human and institutional capacity, brain drain, environmental degradation, IUU fishing, and the other challenges. That regional meeting also laid out the promising initiatives, strategies to address these challenges and to make progress towards the SDGs. Now, as the Caribbean takes up the baton, we know that the discussions will deliver and delve deeply into the challenges that the Caribbean nations share with all seas, including climate change and the sea level rise, dependence on the food and energy imports.
Meanwhile, permanent representative of Samoa to the UN and chair of the Alliance of Small Island Developing States urged delegates to recommit to SIDS, recommit to their development and their survival.
Your critically important issue and formulate bold, proactive, and ambitious solutions to addressing them, including processes to measure, monitor, and evaluate implementation, calling for urgent and bold action that facilitate your unique and special circumstances as SIDS is a must. As the 22nd special session of the United Nations General Assembly on the review and appraisal of the Barbados Program of Action, the then Secretary General of CARICOM said, and I quote, "We look forward to the international community to adopt and implement the policies, including providing the resources, which would add more muscle to the Barbados Plan of Action and impact positively on the condition of small island developing states as part of the United Nations of the 21st
On the Emancipation Month celebrations and the ongoing call for reparatory justice for slavery and native genocide, Acting Prime Minister Montgomery Daniel on radio today said he too also believes there is a need for some level of compensation, as was also outlined at a recent reparation conference held in Barbados, addressed by Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, former Prime Minister of Jamaica J.P. Patterson, and former President of the Nigeria.
And it's obvious, if the planter class, after 1838, was paid for their slaves, what is wrong in asking for some levels of compensation for what was done to the Caribbean countries for the period that the British, the French, the Spanish settled? In our case, the British was the one that dominated for some time. And oh, how they left this country underdeveloped. And so, it is important, as was indicated in Barbados last week, in that roundtable talk on preparatory justice, where you had three legends, three perspectives with one conversation, and that conversation is seeking justice for the Caribbean. I believe the conversation is much more heightened now, and I believe that for those of us in the Caribbean, we will continue to make the call to ensure that justice is brought to the table. Not necessarily you're seeking financial compensation overall, but there are other areas to which St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the wider Caribbean can have some levels of benefit.
Minister Daniel used the opportunity to encourage citizens to support the ongoing Emancipation Month activities being hosted by the Ministry of Culture and other organizations. Meanwhile, today saw the hosting of a culture pot at Peace Memorial Hall to celebrate the International Day of the World's Indigenous People, observed annually on August 9th, to recognize the achievements and contributions of Indigenous people. The culture pot, which included dance, music, poetry, craft, and Indigenous food, was held under the theme Indigenous Youth as Change Agents for Self-Determination in the Americas, International Connections. A culture officer in the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sustainable Development, Maxine Brown, told SVG-TV News that at today's event that it is important that educators use creative methods to teach youth about their culture and their heritage.
Teachers can do the part and do it well. Now, I'm from a very artsy background, and usually school children say history boring and this boring and school is boring. But I will say, if a student can come on and say school is boring, I blame the teacher. Why? It's the role of the teacher to integrate the arts in school, in the subject area. Don't make everything just a talk and chalk. You put the action, put the dance to it. And it's funny I say that. And we recognize that the culture, at the Department of Culture, we chose to collaborate with not the National Cultural Foundation, the Garifuna Heritage Foundation, to bring this program that we have every year in March, where we showcase our Garifuna heritage in a program called Schools National Garifuna Day. It's a Garifuna festival. And so these are ways we try to give back to the school while simultaneously teaching the children our culture through the arts. It's important, teachers, to use your skills, your creativity, to use a bit of the arts to get the message or history across. And as I speak to SVG-TV this morning, this afternoon, I say to you, integrate the arts in education. In that way, you'll make your lessons more interested, and more children will rush to come to school, and you can make a difference. Just integrate the arts in education.
On the historical significance of Baliso, where thousands of Garifunas were banished, Brown said Baliso should become a national shrine.
Ancestors told hard were banished for years before they got the chance to go to Rotten Island and those places the country was Belize. And if we don't try our best now to capture what's ours, we lose everything we're made of. And so it should be an ancestral ground where we can do shrine or pilgrimage rather and go to Baliso on an annual basis because it's expensive to get there. And then it's funny, you can make it a tourist attraction where people come and learn about the heritage, not coming for sea and sun only. Bring them here for heritage. And so I have a strong belief that we should make Baliso a national shrine where we pay homage to our ancestors, our Garifuna people.
Other persons who attended today's Culture Pot event at the Peace Memorial Hall highlighted several measures that can be implemented to ensure the indigenous culture remains intact for generations to come.
Education is key. Education to teach. You have to teach them. If we don't know, we can't do. And education is a powerful tool. I think that's the main one, where we can teach the people. In teaching them, training is also important. If we don't train, like give back the skill. Like now we have so many vendors here today showcasing the indigenous food. Now if you don't teach us how to do it, how will the heritage continue? So you have to teach. And the teachers are coming, you have to train. And to make it your business to transfer the knowledge you have to this generation so we can continue to make a difference.
Maybe more recognition as it relates to, I know in some places you would have, they have a whole day that they would use to commemorate and their arrival and celebrate their culture and so on and so forth. So I think if more time is dedicated, put it on the curriculum. I know a lot of us are not that much educated as it relates to our indigenous culture. Put it on the curriculum. If students are given the opportunity, they're given the exposure from even primary school upward, then I think there will be more appreciation.
I could remember in my history classes that we would be taught about different cultures. We would be taught about Christopher Columbus, we'll be taught about the Africans and the Black Caribs and so on. But I feel that they're not really giving us an open book about the Garifuna people and what we went through and so on. So for this, I think what we can do is just implement it for the new level students in schools, such as kindergarten, grade 1, maybe to grade 5, and then slowly introduce this to the bigger classes.
The Ministry of Education can start to not only administer the history books, but also administer the way back African books, the indigenous people. But there are books and there are writings about these things, but we don't use them in our history classes. We learn about Christopher Columbus, we learn about the British royal family, we learn about the American Revolution, but we do not learn about our culture from the Caribbean. And I think that's very sad, because if we as Caribbean people know about the American Revolution, we know about the British, we know about the Spain and all these things, why can't we know about our own culture, even have it in a book?
Here's a snippet of the performances at the Culture Pots.
When I think of you, I know I'll be okay. Take it down. Noveline Matthews. Anytime I sleep, I see you, my love. Eddie Smith. The morning is you, my love. Charlotte Francois. I just stay right there, join in the middle. Tisha Maxine Brown. Henry the music DJ. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for my Garifuna fashion and then goes in the house. Johnny Max, please. Pardon? Oh, design on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, as you step up on stage, help me welcome Miss Ngozi Aisha. Come on, me, baby. Come on, me.
The Carnival Development Corporation will be hosting its annual prize-giving ceremony on Monday, 21st August at 5 p.m. at a venue to be confirmed. The CDC says the ceremony will hear addresses from Minister of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Sustainable Development and Culture, Carlos James, CDC officials and sponsors. The event will see the distribution of trophies and prize monies won at various competitions held for Vincimas 2023. Meanwhile, the Beauty Shows Committee of the Carnival Development Corporation will launch the GECU Miss SVG 2023 Community Service Project on Wednesday, August 16th at 10 a.m. at the La Vue Boutique Hotel. The CDC Beauty Shows Committee said the GECU Miss SVG Community Service Project is in its second year and seeks to endanger a spirit of volunteerism and outreach that will help to build stronger communities and awaken the consciousness of contestants and persons in the community. This year, the contestants are required to complete a project based on a selected theme by implementing a series of activities within a community across SVG. The launch will see the reveal of the 9 areas to be covered and share insight on the activities and prizes to be awarded to the winner. Remarks will be delivered by the acting CEO of GECU, Maxine Johnny, chairman of the CDC Board of Directors, Ricardo Adams, as well as chairperson of the Beauty Shows Committee, Avia Charles, and Miss SVG 2023 contestants.